Welcome back to the Larson Show. Well, Joe Biden delivers his State of the Union address tomorrow night. Is he going to be patting himself on the back for the economy and then attempting to gaslight Americans into thinking everything's great so that he can raise taxes? I thought we'd discuss that with Brandon Arnold, who's Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Brandon, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me this, is Joe Biden going to really tell Americans tomorrow night everything's going fine, and by the way, I need more of your money?
Pretty much. I mean, I guess we don't have to watch it now after hearing that recap, because I think the gaslighting theme is going to be central to pretty much everything he talks about here. It is going to be, his policies are working. Bidenomics are great. We're going to just keep plowing ahead with enormous deficits, more tax increases. He's going to certainly propose more tax increases. And guess what? He already raised taxes to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars with his lousy policies, including the Inflation Reduction Act, the worst named piece of legislation ever. We're going to get more of the same here. He doesn't seem to recognize the fact that this message is not resonating with the American public for good reason, because it's not working.
Well, I mean, I guess I just wonder, you can only take gaslighting to a certain degree, can't you? Because when those of us sitting here going to the grocery store once a week, as my wife and I do, and we see that grocery prices are insane. And now I make a good salary, but even, Tina will say, I don't know how average people, average incomes can afford these groceries. And I said, well, the answer is they can't. That's why people are piling up credit card debt like crazy. And when I see that mortgage rates, which were 2.7% on the day Joe Biden took the oath of office, that's my benchmark, and now they're north of 7%. And we're getting signals from the Fed that they're not likely to start backing interest rates down. That's got to be crippling for everybody who wants to move, everybody who wants to sell a house, everybody who wants to buy a house, and, of course, the entire home construction industry, which is a big industry in America. How's Joe Biden going to put a silver lining on that one?
Well, it's extraordinarily tough. I'm glad I'm not in his shoes. And the way he's starting to make this message try to work is to divert attention off of his policies and, of course, blame it on corporate America, because that's what the left does. And here we're going to be talking about what he's identified as shrinkflation, and that is the fact that not only are prices going up, but when you go to the grocery store, that bag of chips is 10% smaller. Whatever you're buying there, flour, eggs, whatever, you're getting less in each package. The problem is I don't think Americans are going to buy it. And the reason they're not going to buy it is because, once again, it's not true. We've seen inflation since the very beginning of his policy started taking effect, going back to the American Rescue Plan Act. We didn't need his rescuing attempt. Didn't need it then. We don't need it now. But we have already identified the fact that Biden's policies are failing, that is the reason why we have inflation. The fact is corporations are dealing in a hyper-competitive space there when you're talking about the products they're putting on the shelves at the grocery store are immediately next to their competitors' products. So it's really hard for them to game the system when you have 5, 6, 20 different types of cereal all sitting next to each other from 5 or 6 different manufacturers, and they're all more expensive. So I don't think that narrative is going to work. He's going to keep selling it because that's what he's always done, and you can't teach an old dog, an extremely old dog in this case, new tricks.
Yeah, because Brandon, they keep talking about saying we're going to go after companies that are gouging, but as you point out, if I was the guy at the head of one big cereal company, I'm not, but if I were, and I said, hey, everybody else has doubled their prices, and people complain about $7, $8, $9 for a box of cornflakes. And you say, but we can make them inexpensively enough to make a profit at this price. We're going to undersell all our competition and capture that entire marketplace. I mean, I guess you believe in some kind of giant conspiracy theory where all the cereal makers get together for coffee once a week and say, where should we put the prices this week? In which case, it's all out the window. But I don't think that's happening. But that's what he's going to try to sell. The idea that this isn't my fault, that inflation is up, energy's more expensive, everything's more expensive. It's the fact of all these scheming corporations that have just decided to artificially raise the price, even though, number one, that would be a violation of antitrust laws, and they'd all be in big trouble. And number two, one of them would break from the pack and say, I'm going to price my cereal at $6 and make money all day long.
No, that's exactly right. And the other index that we can look at here is what's happening in international markets. It's not just domestically, but some of the companies that are putting food on the shelves here or making products in the United States aren't even operating in other countries. And we can look at other prices that are taking place, price increases that are taking place. And guess what? A lot of countries are dealing with inflation, but we tend to have a bigger problem with it. And the reason, that's why I think so much of this boils down to lousy tax policy, and we will see a call for higher taxes tomorrow night. It's lousy regulatory policy, and increasingly, you spoke of antitrust policy, the notion that every time something goes wrong, every time corporations try to engage in various transactions, that we need the FTC or the Department of Justice cracking down on them because it's going to be bad for consumers. I don't think that's true. Some mergers are bad for consumers. Not all of them are, but there's this reflexive action to just stop corporations from doing everything that they're doing because they are the big, bad boogeyman. And whether it's inflation, whether it's antitrust, whether it's tax policy, whatever, this administration just wants to stick it to big companies. The problem is big companies employ a lot of Americans, so when you stick it to them, we can get lower wages for Americans, and they make a lot of stuff. And when you're raising the cost to make stuff on these corporations, guess who they're passing it down to? The guy who's making $30,000 and just trying to make ends meet and put food on his family's table. So that's why these policies. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Brandon. The most recent example is this merger between Spirit and JetBlue. And I don't have any airline stocks. So, but when they say we'd like to merge two of the small fry in the airline business and make them a little bit bigger, and the four big airline companies, which are not very competitive because there's four of them, if you put a bigger merger of Spirit and JetBlue together, and they came in and started competing with the big dogs, then you get better service and lower costs. That's what you always get with competition. And what does the Biden administration do? They shoot down the merger of two small fry who might be competition to the big guys, and they protect the big guys. Effective will just divvy up the entire airline business into four companies. And so they shot down the very kind of merger that might have actually helped address the problem.
Yeah, and I think it was just this week that Spirit announced that they were stopping certain routes that they had that were competing directly with some of the legacy carriers. So you actually get fewer options for consumers that are traveling on these specific routes. So we're seeing immediately the impact of this hyper-aggressive antitrust policy. You look at iRobot, they make the robot vacuum cleaners. They blocked an Amazon merger with them. Actually, they colluded with European regulators to block that, which is even worse. And the next day, iRobot laid off 100 American workers in the state of Massachusetts. That is the kind of impact that we have.
Unbelievable. Brandon, thanks so much. I'm up against a hard break, Brandon. That's Brandon Arnold, Executive Vice President at National Taxpayers, and you got the Larson Show.